Well, hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Dave Marsh here of Crossroads Church, and I have with me today a good friend and a guy well known in our community, Mr. Brian Boal. How are you, sir?
Doing good. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Brian, as you know, we're doing this series here at church called Right on the Money. And in this series, we're trying to help folks understand money and stewardship from a biblical worldview. But we also want to kind of partner that with some real practical ideas of, hey, how do I get some control of my money? How do I kind of tell it where it's supposed to go and not wonder where it went,
Right.
and all that sort of stuff. And I wanted to bring you in today to kind of help us do that. You
Sure.
are a local CPA, been in business for many years, 25 plus years,
20,
I think.
20 here in Oakland, and 5, 6 here in
Yeah.
some other locales.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your story and how you got into kind of the world of finance?
Sure, absolutely. So I grew up here in Oakland and went to Southern High School and left Southern High School with really no clue what I wanted to do, and had an accounting teacher at Southern that said you need to pursue accounting. So that's what I did. Went to WVU, got my accounting degree. Went from WVU to PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the largest firms in the country, and spent some time in Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then about 20 years ago, decided to come home and do it at home, and bought an existing practice here in Oakland.
Yeah. So many years ago, before I ever met you, I was doing some work for some local businesses, and I kept hearing, well, my accountant says this and my accountant says that. And at the time, I thought the accountant was just supposed to keep track of the numbers. I didn't know that he advised you and counseled you. And later, I said, well, who is your accountant? And they said, well, Brian Boal. Well, I'd never heard of you, Later, little did I know how God
Right.
would bring our lives together. But what I
Absolutely.
found over the years, that an accountant really does much more than just keep track of numbers. You are that trusted advisor. You kind of really partner with people in helping them find their pathway to financial health. And tell the folks, if they're kind of like me, what all does a CPA do?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there is a little misconception out there that we're bean counters and we're just counting numbers all day, and it's much more than the numbers. We do the taxes, we do the financial statements, we do the bookkeeping, but we are exactly what you said. We pride ourselves on being the trusted advisor of our clients, and we know more. In most cases, we know more about their business than they do.
Yeah.
We want them to do what they do for a living and let us worry about the numbers, let us worry about the finances, and give them the talking points, give them the directions that they can go, let them ultimately make the final decision. But we like to be the trusted advisor of our clients.
Yeah. So if you're listening today, we're going to talk a lot about a lot of things that I think will be practical for anyone. But if you're a small business person or a business owner, we just really encourage you. This is not just a plug for Brian's business, but any CPA. If you're in business for yourself, you need a good CPA. You need that partner. You need kind of that inside but outside voice. They can see things that you can't see. They have a different perspective. So we encourage you, build the right team, and that's kind of one of the things we'll talk about today.
Absolutely. I agree with that completely. Build the right team with your CPA, your banker, your attorney, and your insurance agent. From a financial perspective, you need that team in place to make the right decisions.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of start at the beginning and talk about, to me, one of the basic building blocks of financial health is you got to have a budget.
You do.
And, no one likes budgets. It's like, I'm on a diet for the 10,000th time, however I say that, and I got to count calories.
Right.
It's no fun, but if I'm going to make progress, I got to do it.
That's right.
Same thing with our money. If we're going to make progress with it, we've got to have some sort of system of figuring out what it's supposed to do, and then follow up. Did it actually do that? So talk to us a little bit about, where do you start the budgeting process?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're exactly right. Whether you're in business, whether you're an individual, whether you're a married couple, a budget is the best thing you can do for your finances. Where does it start? It starts at the kitchen table. It starts with pulling out your pay stubs for the month and your bills for the month. Do it for 1 or 2 months. Track every dime that you spend for a 1 or 2 month period. If you really do that over 2 months, you'll get a good handle on where your money's going, and you'll be really surprised at where your money's going. A lot of
Yes.
folks, when we go through this exercise, we do this type thing for a lot of folks that want us to do it. And when we sit down and we show them where their money's going, there's always surprise to say, well, I had no idea that $5 a day at the coffee shop was adding up to what I could make a car payment with.
Yes.
They really don't realize. And you also mentioned, once you put that budget in place, you've got to use it. You've got to track it. We see so many times that folks put the budget in place, but then they put it aside and they don't track it. And that really doesn't do what it's intended to do. So if you really spend the time, and it doesn't take that long, once you get a process going, you're talking 30 minutes a month.
Yeah.
To really track, okay, where did my money go? There are so many software programs out there now that will help do this. There are apps that will help track the budget. You can do it on pencil and paper.
Yeah.
It's just so important to track, to know where your money is going. And then once you know where it's going, then determining where you want it to go. What do we want? A budget is a plan. Where do we want our money to go? If we're not saving for retirement, what do we need to cut so that we can save for retirement?
Yeah.
Lots of different things. If you don't have a budget in place, there's no way to answer those questions.
Yeah. And so we really have to kind of renew our minds and see the budget as an ally. It's a friend.
Absolutely.
It's not an enemy.
That's right.
It's not there to take anything away from you.
Right.
It's just help you to live intentionally
Right.
and achieve your goals.
Absolutely.
But if you got no way to track it, you're not going to be able to get progress.
Absolutely.
So if you've tried budgeting before and you're like, oh, it's so tedious and I hate it, you got to try it again. And I like what you said. I mean, you can start with a yellow pad at the kitchen table.
Yep.
You can use a spreadsheet, a very simple one. There's a software that I like. It's called Every Dollar.
Yep.
They have a free version,
Yep.
and you can track every dollar you spend in
Right.
there. But you just need something.
Absolutely.
No matter what you use, you need something to kind of help you get that plan.
You do.
And as you said, what we often find is surprises.
It is.
Like, I'd really like to pay more on my car.
Right.
But I can't afford to. But once you start tracking it and you realize, hey, I've spent $400 on lunches
Right.
and coffees this month.
Right.
That's an extra car payment. But if you don't track it, you don't know.
Correct.
One of the other things that a budget will help us with, and this is where I see a lot of folks getting tripped up, is saving for short-term and, of course, long-term goals.
Absolutely.
But those short-term things are things like a vacation.
Correct.
Things like Christmas. Talk to us about those short-term savings.
Absolutely. What we see, a common mistake we see on the short-term things, like your vacations, Christmas, like you mentioned, it becomes plastic. It becomes put on a credit card. So you get to Christmas time, there's no savings for Christmas. So what happens is it goes on a credit card, and then you pay for that Christmas for the next 2 or 3 years in some circumstances. Having a budget in place, planning ahead of time. Part of the budgeting process is setting goals, setting short-term goals and long-term goals. I always tell people, budget out for the month, budget out for the year, but also start thinking 5 years, start thinking 10 years ahead of time. A year ahead of time, you should be planning for that vacation. You know that vacation's going to come next summer. Start throwing a couple bucks away each month for that vacation, so that when the time comes, you're not putting it on a credit card. You're paying for it in cash. The satisfaction of that will be worth the vacation. It will make the vacation better.
Yeah.
It really will.
Yeah, because you can enjoy it.
Exactly.
When you're financing it, you're always thinking about those bills that are going to come due when you get home.
Absolutely.
And when you've put a couple $100 away here and a couple $100 away there, however you can do it,
Right.
you get to enjoy that thing.
Exactly.
And the sand feels different, the water feels different.
Exactly.
The chicken wings are better.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
and here's what my heart really is like, in our church and in our community, we have people all over the spectrum financially. I mean, we have folks who are really struggling.
Right.
They're trying to figure this thing out. They're trying to get ahead. And we have folks who are very, very wealthy,
Right.
and kind of everyone in between. But what we want people to know from this series is, if you could take God's principles and promises, they will work no matter where your income is.
Right.
You might have to start small.
Absolutely.
The person with a very small income, you're going to start small, but that's okay.
Absolutely.
God will bless your faithfulness.
No question.
And if you're diligent, you say, Lord, I really want to honor you with whatever money you give me. I want to honor you with it. He'll bless it and he'll multiply it.
Absolutely.
And I know you've seen it. I've seen it over and over again, that as you do that, God, he does entrust more to you.
No question about it. Just a personal story that I'll add that just happened this week. We had a soccer season this year, and as president of the soccer association, I sat down with the board and said, we're going to do this spring season. We're going to get the kids out to do this, and we're not going to charge them anything. We're going to do it on our own. We need the kids out to play. We're not going to have fancy uniforms. We're just going to make it happen. Your kids were a part of that. Your grandkids were a part of that. We have found that in that season, we had more money come in than normally comes in a regular season when we have folks pay.
Wow.
It was amazing what happened, and I truly believe that was a blessing from God.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. He just has a way of making up where, sometimes the math doesn't quite make sense.
Exactly.
But it's this spiritual principle that he blesses our obedience. And when he tells you to do something like that, you had that prompting, he ends up blessing it.
Right. And sometimes you have to rely on faith. And I think decisions like that, you base it on your faith, and you truly know that God will come through for you.
Yeah. I know when Patty and I started trying to say, okay, our money's not ours. It belongs to the Lord, and we're going to try to honor him. Our income was pitiful. It was
Right.
pitiful. But we started, and we began to tithe, and we began to save. And here's what we could save was $1
Right.
every 2 weeks.
Right.
That was literally, I'm not making this up. This is true story.
Right.
We started, because we couldn't afford we thought to save anything.
Right.
So we said, we'll just do it out of obedience. And we're going to save $1 every 2 weeks. And that's what we started doing, And I'm just telling you, supernaturally, over time, now it wasn't the next day.
Right.
But over some time, the next thing you know, we had $1,000.
Right.
And to us, and this is,
Right.
decades ago,
Right.
but to us,
Right.
like, that was amazing.
Absolutely.
And we just began to see God's faithfulness over and over and over again. So we talk about saving, short-term goals. Christmas comes every year.
Right. Exactly.
It just comes every year. Your car is going to need fixed. It's going to need tires. It happens. So you need to make sure you're getting those short-term savings into your budget.
Right.
Now, long-term. Let's talk about some things that maybe were, retirement.
Right.
The power of compound interest over time is huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the younger you can start, the better, right?
Absolutely. And we see so many cases of folks getting into their 60s that haven't saved for retirement. And it's sad. It really is sad from our side of the table when we look at that and say, here's what your monthly Social Security might be, but that's all there's going to be. And you need, so saving for retirement is so important. And the earlier you can start, the better, because exactly what you said, compound interest adds up.
Yeah.
And if you get used, and what I always tell people is just get used to not having that money on a monthly basis. Whether it's $5 or it's $500, get used to not having that. That's part of the budgeting process, is how much, when we really see what we're spending, what can we pull out of the budget so that we can save more for retirement, or so that we can add an extra $100 to our monthly mortgage payment? If you really look at a mortgage or a loan on a car, if you put extra payments down over the course of that loan, it really makes a huge difference. So long-term savings plans and the other thing that we haven't mentioned that we'll touch on too would be an emergency fund.
Yeah.
That's between a short-term and a long-term goal, because you want to build that emergency fund up over time too. I like to see people have somewhere between 3 to 6 months of their monthly expenses in an emergency fund. That emergency fund is simply a savings account, but you want to make that emergency fund a savings account that's difficult for you to access.
Okay.
You don't want it to be the savings account that you can go to the ATM machine and take money out for.
Yeah.
You don't want that to be the one that you can access online and pay a bill with. You want it to be in a bank that you really don't go to, where it's just hard to access, but you also want to set it up so on a monthly basis, out of your regular checking account, some amount is going into that emergency fund. Again, it may be, depending on circumstances, it may be $5, or it could be several $100s. but you really do want to build up an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months for that large car repair or that large house repair or that large medical bill that comes unexpectedly. So many people don't have this. And what happens is then that large medical bill ends up on a credit card.
Yep.
And you're paying that medical bill for the next 3 to 6 years at 19% interest. And that what started as a $4,000 medical bill ends up being $8,000 by the time it's done. So that emergency fund is so important as a part of the short-term and long-term planning strategy as well.
Yeah. I read a stat not long ago that the average American cannot cover a $400 emergency, and we certainly don't say that to belittle anybody, but we just say that like our hearts hurt for you. Like we don't want to see you live that way, and we're the richest nation in the world and we're struggling to this point. We've really got to change our habits. And oftentimes it's not a lack of money, it's a lack of planning. And so I think about back to when COVID first hit, and like none of us knew what was going to happen. We didn't know what was going to happen with our jobs or our churches, our businesses. We didn't know about any kind of government help or PPP or anything in the very beginning. And I think about the folks who would have maybe not had anything saved at that moment, versus somebody who has that 3 to 6 months. The level of peace is going to be different.
Absolutely.
It just really is. And we know we ultimately we trust in the Lord, but He instructs us over and over again to plan for these things. And sometimes we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but that emergency fund can really make all the difference, not just in our financial lives, but in our emotional state.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely. COVID was a huge wake-up call, I think, from a financial standpoint to have your house in order when it comes to your personal finances as well as your business finances. I mean, just it's not hard to look out right now and see the businesses that didn't make it through COVID. And the businesses that didn't make it didn't have a reserve to fall back on. And we're seeing that, unfortunately, on the individual side as well. So it's just so important to save for the future and to have that cushion you can fall back on. And again, you need to contribute to that emergency fund on a monthly basis. Make it a regular thing until you get it built to where you want it to be. It's again, get used to not having that money.
I tell people sometimes, like, if the government decided tomorrow that there was a new tax, which could happen.
Very well could happen.
And they just decided, hey, we're going to take an extra 5% of your paycheck. There's not much you could do about it. You would have to learn to live without it. Well, if you give the government that kind of priority in your life, give yourself that kind of priority.
Absolutely.
Pay yourself, and say, I'm just going to figure out how to make this work, and I'm going to get myself a cushion so that I don't fall apart. My marriage isn't under stress. My kids aren't all stressed out, because your kid's going to pick up on that too. When there's a lack of finances in the house, everybody pays a price for it.
Absolutely.
And again, what we want folks to know is, it doesn't matter where you're at right now. This is, going through this stuff is not like condemning anybody. And if you weren't prepared or aren't prepared for emergencies or future things, just start where you are.
Absolutely.
You can, it's never too late. You can start now. There's hope. You can figure out kind of a new way to live. And hopefully we can kind of equip you with some of these tools. We talked about the government and how it sometimes impacts the way we live.
Sure does.
One of the newest things out is this kind of child tax credit that you're going to get in advance. And I think this is something that many of us don't quite understand, and I hope maybe you could walk us through that just a little bit today.
Yeah, we can definitely touch on that. It's an advanced child tax credit, and July 15th, which I believe is tomorrow, they are going to start funding the advanced child tax credits to folks. It is important that the child tax credit did increase. It was $2,000 in the past. It's now up to anywhere between $3,000 and $3,600, depending on the age of the child. And the government is going to advance you a monthly payment for the next 6 months of that child tax credit in 2021. You want to be careful with this for a couple reasons. It is, if you're used to getting a tax refund at the end of the year. I have lots of folks that say, well, I count on that tax refund to pay my property taxes, or I count on that tax refund for my vacation fund.
Yes.
If you take the advanced child tax credit, be prepared that you may see a reduced refund at the end of the year. Now, like I said, the child tax credit did increase slightly, but you're getting paid your refund in advance is what's happening. So you may see a decrease in that refund at the end of the year. So you want to be careful with that. Again, be prepared if that's your vacation fund. As you receive that advanced child tax credit, don't spend it. Set it aside, or vacation may not be what you expect it to be. So you want to be careful from that circumstance. And then people that normally owe on the tax side of things at the end of the year want to be careful as well, because again, if you normally owe on your tax return and you're taking an advance of the child tax credit, there's a likely potential you will owe more come tax time, because again, you're being advanced the child tax credit, which could potentially end up with you owing more money on the back end. So you want to be careful with this advanced child tax credit. It is meant to help supplement the monthly budget, but just keep the word advanced in mind, as they are advancing you the money.
Yes. This is not just free money.
It's not.
Do whatever I want with it. It's coming from somewhere. And for some folks, it could be very helpful.
Correct.
If you've been having a hard time making ends meet, now, again, you're getting that in advance, and that's going to be a supplement. But you just have to know it's not going to be there in the end.
It's not a stimulus check. The stimulus checks were different. The stimulus checks were paid out to help keep the economy running. This is different. This is meant to do the same thing, but this does have an implication on the back end that the stimulus checks did not have.
Yeah. So, again, just encourage you to really consider your situation. And so for some folks, Brian, it might be a good idea to actually opt out of it.
That's correct. Opting out is, we've advised a lot of people to opt out, again, in the circumstances that I mentioned. If you are counting on that refund for, to be your vacation fund or your Christmas fund or something of that nature, opting out might be a good idea. It's very simple. You log on to irs.gov and you'll enter some information and actually opt out of that credit. Even if it has started, if it's too late now and you receive the July payment, but you don't want to receive future payments, you can still opt out as long as you log on at least 3 days before the payment is to come to you.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you, because that helps clear up, I think, a lot of misconceptions and misunderstanding about what this actually is.
I agree, and it is a big concern. We really have some major concerns that at the end of the year, some people are going to get some unpleasant surprises out of this.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. So just be careful on that. It always looks good when you see an unexpected deposit in your bank account, but this one could come with a little sting.
Has some implications, absolutely.
Brian, you've been doing this, you said, over 25 years.
Right.
And so you've walked with a lot of families, a lot of businesses through many, many different kind of circumstances. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see people make? And then on the flip side of that, kind of a two-part question, those who have done well, what have you seen? I'm sure there's some kind of consistent patterns that you see in a group of folks that, hey, they seem to really be wise stewards of what they've been given.
Absolutely. I'll start with the mistakes first, because we do see a lot of these, and they become patterns, and they're hard to correct. So it takes time, and it takes diligence, and it takes, like we've mentioned before, budgeting and focusing on your finance to correct. I think the biggest one we see is just excessive spending.
Okay.
Just spending in areas where you don't even know it's happening sometimes. That $5 cup of coffee that you're getting on the way to work every day. That pay-per-view movie every night that, this is a new movie, I really want to see it. Well, it's $21.99 and I'm going to go ahead and get it. That adds up. If you do that a couple times a month, that's going to add up. The other thing we see a lot of is signing up for the apps on the phone, and it's $14.99 a month, and all of a sudden you use that app for 1 month and you forget about it, but your credit card's getting charged each and every month for that app, whether you're using it or not. So you really want to review those credit card statements on a monthly basis, and am I really still using that service or not? Because we see so many subscriptions that just aren't, you aren't utilizing anymore, but you're still paying for.
Yeah.
We also see people make decisions based on the monthly payment, and that really, as an accountant, that drives us crazy, because we want to know how much interest are you paying over the course of the loan, or
Yeah.
what's the interest rate on the loan, and what's the term. And we see so many people make decisions to buy a house or a car based on what's my monthly payment going to be.
So the question is, can I afford it?
That's right.
But the way they come up with the answer is, can I make the payment?
Exactly.
That's not the right
It's
answer to
not.
that question.
It's not. I can't tell you how many times we see it on an annual basis that they'll say, well, here's my monthly payment on this piece of equipment. And I'll say, well, let me have the paperwork so I can work back and figure out what the breakdown is. And we'll look at it, and it'll be 10, 12% interest, and they have no idea that they're paying that. Well, that's not what I thought I was paying. I thought I was paying 2%. Well, you've got to read the fine print, and when you're making a financial decision, it's not all about monthly payment. It's about what are you paying for the product, and what's the interest rate going to be over time.
Yes, yeah, you got to answer the right question, and it's not, can I make the payment?
Right.
And a lot of times now, I mean, even salespeople are trained to not tell you what something costs, is simply to tell you what the payment is.
Absolutely.
And when I'll ask them, yeah, but how much does it cost?
Right.
Sometimes they can't even answer it.
Absolutely.
Because all they focus on is that payment.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to know the final cost. I've shared this question or this story before, but we bought our first house when we were pretty young. And of course, excited to get our first house.
Right.
But we need some furniture for it, And
Right.
so it was like, okay, I didn't have any money anymore, because I'd paid maybe a little something down on the house. And so we went and picked out this beautiful blue couch, and it was one of the first ones that had recliners built in the couch.
Right.
That's how I can remember couches that no recliners. But this one had it, and I was so excited about it. And we signed for it. I got home, started reading the paperwork like a week later.
Right.
And realized I'm paying 33% interest on the couch.
Absolutely.
So, that's one of my big stupid mistakes with money. But I learned that day at 21 years old, I really do need to stop just asking how much the payment is and find out, what is this thing going to cost me? When you sign a purchase agreement, somewhere on there is going to be something called TOP, total of payments.
Exactly.
And that's what you want to look at and make your decisions based on that and not just monthly payments.
And prepayment penalties, you have to be very careful these days too. A lot of these finance agreements will have a prepayment penalty, and you want to ask that ahead of time. You want to know, we talked a little bit ago about throwing an extra $100 on the mortgage payment every month. Well, can you do that? Some of these instruments now, these sales are pretty slick, and you'll find that there's a prepayment penalty for paying something off early. You don't want that. You want the ability to pay something off early.
Yes.
If there's a prepayment penalty, walk away.
Yeah. And along those same lines, don't allow even a bank or a salesman to tell you what you can afford.
Right.
You need to know what you
Absolutely.
can afford, and you need to make that decision. And if you're married, you need to make that decision together.
Absolutely.
But just because you qualify for a certain loan, the bank is not, they're not in charge of your life.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. No, we see that mistake made all the time, and it is becoming what I'm going to call house poor. Okay. Making, buying too much of a house or buying too much of a car that the bank may say you can afford it.
Yes.
But just because you can afford it doesn't mean that it fits in your monthly budget.
Yeah. And
you really need to take a hard look. Again, that makes this budgeting process so important when you're making big decisions. It's important regardless, but especially when you're making big house decisions or car decisions, don't buy too much house, don't buy too much car, because it really will be a payment that's going to stick with you for a long time and impact your monthly finances.
Yeah, yeah. So we talk about common mistakes. How about on the other side? Are you seeing some patterns that are just, hey, these folks, maybe they're not really wealthy, but over time, they've kind of, they found their rhythm, and they did, X, Y, Z, and it's really paid off for them.
Yeah.
What are some of those things that people
Absolutely.
win with money?
Yeah.
What
Winning with money, it's planning for retirement, because we all want to retire. We all want to have that point in life where we can step away from work and enjoy it. And the folks that save early, they start early. And just like I said, you get used to, whether it's $25 a month or it's $250 a month, you get used to it not being there. Yeah. Compound interest works. Putting that money away each and every month, and you don't want it to be in a position where you're writing a check to do it. You want it coming out of your paycheck, or you want it automatically being withdrawn from your bank and put into the retirement plan. Folks that save for retirement, it works. And they're so much happier when it becomes retirement age. They're not worrying about it all their life because they know it's happening. They're seeing that statement on a monthly basis. Will there be ups and downs? Absolutely, there will be ups and downs.
Yeah.
But as long as you know you're doing it, it's going to work out in the long run. So that's probably, but the over and above that, again, the budgeting, the folks that budget, the folks that spend the time on a monthly basis, and it's not that much time, to analyze what they're spending their money on, they're the ones that are successful.
Yeah.
They know not to spend too much in eating out, going out every that can add up, and they know that they're watching that, and if they've met their budget for the month, they're going to eat in the rest of the month, and that's who's successful from a financial standpoint.
Yeah.
Those that are really watching where their money's going on a regular basis.
Yeah. Now, you help us with a premarital class that we do, and usually we will, any folks who are getting married within this year that is coming up, we'll bring them together usually in the spring and walk through some principles that kind of help them be set up for a successful marriage.
Right.
And we bring you in and you talk about the financial component.
Right.
And you talk about a lot of great stuff in there, but one of the things you talk about is actually tithing.
Right.
And this is something, as a pastor, over the course of the years, I've probably evolved here and there. Like, there have been times I've been afraid to talk about money because I thought, well, people will think I just want their money,
Right.
But later I realized that if I don't, I'm really taking something from them.
Right.
It's my job to help educate them
Right.
on God's ways of handling money.
Right.
And I know it's something that you believe in. And so talk to us a little bit about, I guess, number one, why is it hard? I think it is hard for
Right.
people
It is.
to tithe.
Right.
It's a big deal.
Right.
Why is it hard? But what are some of the blessings and benefits you've seen over the years from it?
Sure. So why is it hard is a great question. And back to the budgeting process again, it should be a budgeted item in your budget. It should be
Okay.
one of the line items in your budget is tithing. Why is it so hard? I think because you don't get a bill in the mail for the tithe every month. The church is not going to send you a bill and say, here's your tithe, and if you don't pay it, you're not going to get collection agency calls from the church.
I've tried that, and it doesn't go over very well.
But it's easy to let it slip for a week, and then when it slips for a week, it's 2 weeks, and then it's a month, and then all of a sudden you're off habit, and it's just an easy bill to skip, but it shouldn't be. I can't. I think it's the personal reward of tithing is something that is so satisfying when you're looking at your finances and you know that you've given your fair share to the Lord. It just makes your whole financial model so much more successful. You feel better about your own finances. I've never had a client in 25 years come to me and say, I gave too much to the church. I can't believe it. I wish I had some of that back. I've never had that happen. It's always the opposite. It's always folks that say, it was a stretch for me to do that, but the dividends that have come from it have been so many.
Yeah.
I've never seen it go in the opposite direction. So it's an important part of the budget. It should be figured into the budget. If you're living paycheck to paycheck right now, there's something wrong. You've got to figure out what's going on, and the only way to do it is in that budgeting process. And if tithing is a line item and you make yourself focus on that line item, the dividends will come.
Yeah. Well, what I've found in my life, and again, we started tithing when we got into ministry. My salary was $50 a week.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so $5 a week.
Right.
Was my salary literally, was my tithe, and that's when we started the journey and the process. And thankfully over the years it's grown a little bit. But what's helped me is when I put God first. Like I decided, hey, if we were going to do it, because we were broke.
Right.
If we're going to do it, we got to do it first.
Right.
Because if we wait to see what's left over, there is nothing left
That's right.
over.
That's right.
So for us, we said, okay, we're going to put God first.
Right.
And when we put God first, there was like this shift that happened in our mind.
That's right.
And not only did it help us spiritually, but what I also saw is tithing is kind of like a vaccine against selfishness.
Absolutely.
So we began to be generous with our money, But then I saw that our marriage got better
Absolutely.
because I was no longer seeing my money as something to serve me. I started not seeing my marriage as something just to serve
Right.
me. You know, in the generosity I started seeing in money started spreading
Right.
to my family.
Absolutely.
And over the years, as you said, you can see this long track record of you don't have people who say, boy, I really regret
Right.
putting God first in my finances.
Right.
I can tell you this from a pastor standpoint, I do very few counseling sessions for tithers.
Good point.
It's just true. I'm not saying that bad things don't happen to all of us,
Right.
but I'm saying that self-inflicted pain,
Yep.
I do very few of those sessions for people who are generous.
Right.
Because if you will put God first, you begin to see all these other areas of your life come in line with His
Absolutely.
Word. It's not I don't want to put it. It's not a quick fix like I'm paying God to bless me.
Absolutely.
Nothing like that. Don't get me wrong on that. It reprioritizes our hearts.
It does.
And then we have better relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't understand it all, but it works.
No, I love what you said there, because if you carve the tithe out of your budget first and you work with the other 90% or what it may be to put your budget together, you're exactly right. The blessings will come.
Yeah, yeah. We've just seen it over and over and again. So I don't want to keep you all day. I know you're a busy guy, but
problem.
any other things you think we should hit on here before we close today?
No, I think those are the we're living in sort of crazy times right now, and finances are very important. Like I said, I think COVID was a great wake up call to check out your finances, be ready. Take a look at what's coming in and what's going out, and it may really surprise you. But planning for retirement, planning for college, it's going to be as important as ever. Prices are going up. Prices are going up on everything. So the more we can save right now, the better.
Yeah. And again, we just want to encourage anybody who maybe feels financially overwhelmed, slow down, step back. Getting things out of your head and onto paper, that budget will actually help you.
Absolutely.
It'll kind of ease some of that overwhelm, and then you can start to kind of get your plan together and move forward from there.
And reach out for help. There's nothing to be ashamed of in finances. We've all made mistakes in finances. Reach out for help. Anybody that needs help, an accountant, a banker, anybody's willing to help in that circumstance. And we've done it many times here at the church. And I mean, nobody should be ashamed or embarrassed of anything in their finances. We've all made mistakes.
Yep. Hey, let's close in prayer today, all right? Father, we thank you so much for this time together, and thanks for those who are tuning in, watching, listening today. And I do pray for them and for us, for all of us, Lord, that we could recognize that everything in our lives, it first came from you. You're a good father who gives good gifts to your children. And Lord, we then want to in turn be good stewards of what you've entrusted into our hands. So I ask you to help us to think like you, see our money and our possessions like you would, and help us to use them, God, in ways that, well, yes, meet the needs of our family, but also just encourage those around us, bless those in need, build your kingdom locally and around the world. And we give you thanks and praise for your principles and your promises, and it's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, sir, for being with us.
Thank you.